How far would you go in search of answers if your loved one turned up dead in suspicious circumstances? In some cases, a parent's love for their child can know no bounds. But at what point do you say enough is enough? Can you look too far into pieces of evidence, too far into small pieces of a larger puzzle to see the bigger picture? We'll let you decide. Welcome to another intriguing episode of All Things Mysterious, the podcast where all the realms of true crime, supernatural, and the unexplained converge. I'm your host, Jordan.
Hi, Matt.
We're ready to plunge into today's fascinating mysteries. Let's dive right in. On January 11th, 2013, a group of students were hanging out in the old gym in Valdosta, Georgia before class and saw something odd in the corner with some old rolled-up wrestling mats sitting vertically for storage. When they investigated, they found a shocking sight: a person stuck vertically inside a rolled-up wrestling mat. At first, they thought this person was still alive, so they got help from administrators who were able to push the mat down and free the person inside, who unfortunately turned out to be 17-year-old Kendrick Johnson, who was not alive. To set the scene a little bit, the wrestling mats are roughly 6 feet tall and rolled vertically. There was a shoe at the bottom of the mat, and Kendrick was not wearing shoes. It was fairly well known that kids would often use the mats like a locker of sorts, and it's been theorized that Kendrick got stuck climbing into the mat upside down to retrieve the tennis shoe, but there are weird circumstances. I'll explain. When he was autopsied, the medical examiner said he died from positional asphyxiation, meaning he suffocated from basically being upside down too long, and believed it was an accident. We'll get into that further in a little bit. Additionally, there was blood coming from Kendrick's body, pooling at the bottom of the mat, but the blood was not pooling onto the shoe, just underneath it. So exactly how did the shoe only have blood underneath it and not on it?
Did not recognize the name, recognize the story, though.
I thought you might.
I think I need to take a break from your stories. I always get my blood pressure way too high.
That's what I'm here for, to raise your blood pressure.
My revenge was taking you ghost hunting, and that didn't even work out the way I wanted it to.
Sure didn't. I enjoyed it.
We're going to take you to one that's really scary, and it won't work out for you.
No, it probably won't. You're probably right.
Because I think houses are a little more familiar, so it wasn't as bad, but I think we take you to a prison or an asylum. That'll be different.
I don't know. I'm kind of crazy. I might fit in.
Wow, that's true. This story is weird. Definitely suspicious.
And it can go so many ways. Obviously, I don't want to give anything up for anybody who does not know the case well, and this is their first time hearing it. But it can go so many different ways, and there's so many twists and turns. But just the way he was found, it's just so weird. And nobody heard him. If he was calling out, nobody heard anything.
Which isn't that surprising with those mats, because they would really reflect the sound.
Yeah, they would muffle it pretty good, you would think. But there's traffic in and out of the gym. From what I understand, kids go through the gym, like to cut corners going to and from class. And nobody saw anything. Nobody heard anything. It's just weird.
Yeah, teenagers aren't exactly quiet people. So if they're into the gym, they're probably going to be really loud. They're not going to really listen to the environment. And like I said, those wrestling mats will really dampen sound. They're basically just thick foam.
Oh, no, I agree with that entirely. I'm just thinking nobody realized there's basically half a person sticking out from the mat, like at least feet. I believe feet were sticking out. It was hard to tell once they'd gotten him down.
That could almost fit his entire body in there.
Yeah, he was a big kid.
I think from what I remember, it was just his feet that were sticking out.
It was basically feet and calves, I believe, and one arm was outstretched.
But unless you're looking, you're not really going to notice anything right away. Again, teenagers oblivious to the world around them.
Yeah, but if other kids used those as lockers, you would think he would have been found sooner. You would think.
That's the one part that I don't really understand about this. I've used some weird stuff as lockers in my day. Never used a roll up mat though.
From what I understood, now this I couldn't verify very well. This I heard like second and third hand. So take this with a grain of salt. There either weren't a lot of available lockers or you had to have a lock for the lockers and he didn't have a lock. So kids would just throw him in there for safekeeping. And he also shared this pair of shoes that he was using with another kid. So they would just leave them in there, grab them when they needed them, and go.
Our school has always provided us locks.
Ours didn't.
Oh, ours did because they wanted access to them. If I'm going to pay for a lock, I'm not giving them access to it.
Ours did not.
That's weird.
Now, if we had a lock, they needed the lock combination, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. See, I wouldn't. If I'm going to pay for a lock, there's no way I'm going to be giving the school it. It's the point. And maybe it's just because all through middle school and high school, the locks were always provided with the lockers.
Yeah, they weren't at the schools that I went to. And their reasoning back then was so that if we couldn't remember it, they could help us remember it. Or if we needed to get something when we were sick or something, they could get it for us.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't recall ever actually using a lock, to be honest.
I always did, but like in middle school, we had the lockers that the locks were built into the door.
Oh, I would hate that.
But in high school, we were issued combination locks. But of course, they just basically reused them every year. That's weird to me that you had to buy your own lock.
I think different public schools do it differently.
Apparently, but I just always thought that it was the same. Now, my junior and senior year in high school, I never really even used a locker because I had my car. So I just kept everything in my car.
Oh, see, we weren't allowed to go to our cars.
We weren't either, but
We also weren't allowed to carry our backpacks anywhere. They had to be in our lockers.
no, that's the stupid rule.
It was for safety.
That's literally what a backpack's for, though, to carry books and stuff from class to class.
We were not allowed.
Wow.
Could have had weapons in it.
You got pockets. At least guys do, girls don't, but
Well, and girls carried ginormous purses that were honestly larger than backpacks anyway.
it's just funny how, like, the public school system, they make these stupid rules that make zero sense.
My personal favorite public school system rule that we weren't allowed to basically show our shoulders because I don't know, they were like sexualized, obviously. Shoulders.
Don't even get me started on that because
It still makes me giggle because I'm just like, yeah, shoulders. Whoa.
as a parent to two girls, I don't understand the reasoning for so highly policing girls' clothing, but not having any kind of rules against guys' clothing.
We're a distraction.
If school's so boring that a girl's gonna be a distraction for a guy, that's on the school to make learning a little more interesting.
My favorite part, though, is that the cheerleaders on game days could wear their cheerleading outfits, but those were not a distraction.
Yeah.
Still funny.
Anyways, off topic, but moving on.
So, Kendrick's parents did not agree with the ruling that it was an accident. There were a few things that just didn't add up for them. Number one, he did not look like he had been suffocated. He appeared like he'd been beaten. Supposedly, this happens due to the rush of the blood to the head for long periods of time, but his parents were so outraged that they decided to share photos of him, deceased, to the media to hopefully get his case reopened and gain traction. They also didn't believe he could have gotten himself stuck in the gym mat. It was a very small opening, and they believed someone had done it to him and stuck him inside. Recordings from the school were eventually, after a court order, released to the family, but there was roughly an hour of tape missing, and they didn't show what actually happened. The camera angles were off. They're blurry, timestamps are off, and that's supposedly due to different cameras being on different servers. So we still don't have an answer. However, all of this, including the media pressure from the photos of Kendrick after death, did make police take a second look. I will note the photos are still out there. I do not recommend looking, but if you insist, they are incredibly graphic. Viewer discretion is advised.
Okay, I'm going to say something that a lot of people know, but they don't necessarily want to admit. Schools are a lot like businesses in a sense. They are going to protect themselves at all costs.
When it comes to the tapes, at least with the court order, they had to wait till the court order because it had other minors in it. So they had to. It wasn't something that they were just like, no, we're not going to release that to you. It had other minors in it. It's not like they could just be like, well, here you go. They had to protect the other students legally.
Yes and no.
Releasing it to the parents, yes. Police, no.
Yeah. But here's the thing. The school is going to protect themselves from any kind of liability, which is why they're going to do everything in their power to not release the footage. My guess is someone probably accidentally, and accidentally is definitely in quotes there, deleted the footage that showed what happened to protect themselves.
I will note that police did not technically collect the evidence themselves. They had somebody from the school give them the footage. So it's possible that some of the files were damaged, corrupted, or not given correctly, or something along those lines. It's possible it wasn't even malicious.
It's possible, but unlikely.
Unlikely, yes, but it's possible.
The school's going to protect itself. It's just like a business. Businesses don't care about workers. Everybody already knows that. It's whether they want to admit it. Schools are the same way. Those kids are just numbers to them. Those kids are just money for them. They don't actually care about students. Now, I will say some like teachers obviously do.
I don't believe that there was a camera directly where he was actually found. That's what gets me. There wasn't necessarily even a camera at that direct area.
Which I do not believe at all. We covered this earlier, but every school is different. But the one thing that pretty much all schools have in common, especially the ones that have security cameras, they are very good at making sure every blind spot is covered.
Yeah, yes and no.
You gotta understand, like, Valdosta is a pretty big school,
This gym was little, though. It was little, and it was the old one. It wasn't used nearly as much.
but they're still gonna have it covered. If for anything else, as soon as kids know that there's a blind spot, where's the first place they're gonna go to make out and do other stuff? The blind spot. So I do not believe that they didn't have an angle on it. I believe that they told everybody that they didn't have an angle on it.
Because they had footage of him coming into the gym, which is when they know when he was last seen. It was just before third period the day before, and then that was it.
But I 100% believe they had footage of the actual what happened. They just didn't want to release it because A, it made their school look bad, or B, they were trying to protect themselves.
It's definitely sketchy. It is 1000% sketchy.
I 110% do not believe that they did not have a camera pointed right where it happened at.
What gets me is that one way or the other, something happened to this kid. And if there was a camera, just give the parents peace of mind because obviously they need to know some way or another. Thankfully, they were able to at least bury their child. Unfortunately, there are a lot of cases out there where people don't get that chance and they never get that opportunity. But these parents, they don't have a clue. They have their son. But there's these really weird circumstances where there's just this giant question mark and they don't know. They have this bad feeling where they're 90% sure that something malicious happened, but they don't know.
Yeah, that's one thing that I'm going to say is I'm not going to say that anything necessarily malicious happened. We don't know, but I 110% believe that the school covered something up, whether it's an accident that they're covering it up.
It's definitely weird.
And that's, like I said, that's because they're protecting themselves. That's what they do. But again, I do not believe that there was a blind spot. So I'm going to 100% say that they had cameras and they're covering it up.
Something definitely weird's happening.
Now, I'm not going to say that there was any kind of foul play as far as his death in any sort, because I just don't think there's any kind of evidence of that yet.
We'll see about that in just a moment.
But the school definitely covered something up. And that's the same thing with businesses. Sometimes they cover up the stupidest stuff just because of public perception, which in hindsight, it ends up working against what they're trying to do anyways, because the public sees that the school's not being cooperative. And the first thing people are going to think is they're trying to hide something.
Yeah. And what it makes me think about, and I'll have to think about doing this as a case actually, but it reminds me a little bit of the correct way to actually handle things is the Tylenol murders, because that's the correct way to do things. Because the first thing Tylenol did was say, nobody take any of our product.
Yeah.
Nobody at all. The first thing they did was say, I cannot tell you if this is safe or not. Do not take it, period.
I've done that case yet.
No, we haven't. We should.
That's one I think I'm going to do that one next week because that one's really good.
It is really good. You should do it. But they handled it
Yeah.
the most professional, amazing way. And they are still a big brand because of how well they handled it. And look at how guilty the school looks right now because they're shady about it.
If you own a business or run a school, listen to these words. If you try to hide something, whether you're actually trying to hide anything or not, you are going to look guilty.
Period.
And if you don't have anything to hide, release the footage because automatically, whether you have anything to hide or not, people are going to assume that you do. And they're going to start looking a lot closer at you.
Them's the facts.
I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but it seems like everybody should know this type thing.
Kendrick's parents, grief stricken, angry, and refusing to believe this was an accident, hired a medical examiner of their own to perform a second autopsy. So they exhumed his body and found several things that were really off. First, they found that his body had been stuffed with newspaper and his internal organs were missing. We'll go over why that may not actually be the biggest red flag in history in a minute. But the medical examiner was able to examine the rest of his body and did find bruising on his neck indicative of blunt force trauma, officially changing the ruling of his death in his opinion. Obviously, his parents were both relieved and furious. They had a gut feeling this wasn't an accident and just had to prove it. But what about the newspaper? It turns out the funeral home offered to basically do the service for free. And while it's not a common occurrence anymore, it used to be common to stuff the body cavities with newspaper in case organs didn't accompany the body. Were the organs lost? Yes. We don't know who to blame for that. His clothes were lost as well. The funeral home supposedly signed off that they had all of it, but it's possible they either thought they had it all and didn't, or it's possible they lost it. Either way, we know for sure at this point Kendrick died from blunt force trauma, but we still don't know how he ended up in the mat.
Here's the thing. Let's just say, hypothetically, something happened before he went into that mat. Got into a fight, something. Had severe blunt force trauma, and then was confused.
Dazed out of it.
Yeah. And then ended up in the mat because maybe he was using it for a locker and then got stuck and then eventually succumbed to his injuries. That would still be considered accidental. But I do think the school knows exactly what happened. They're just not going to ever release it unless somebody actually grows a conscience and decides to release it.
Nope.
But again, I don't necessarily think, even so far, there's anything that really points to murder. At the very most, it kind of points to a tragic accident. I'm not ruling out murder, obviously.
It's just such a weird situation. The whole
Wow.
thing.
It is. I just hate when there's always a second medical examiner who examines the body, especially one paid for by the family, because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for foul play or inconsistencies. The organ's missing. Could have happened during the previous medical exam.
See, that's what I'm thinking too. I hate to say this, but it's so easy to just sign off and just be like, yeah, everything's here. And it's not. I really hate to say that, but they were trying to do a nice thing. They were trying to take care of him free of charge. And they're just like, yep, looks like everything's here. Sounds good. And maybe they weren't the best funeral home, but they were trying to do a good deed. Maybe they just weren't the most detail oriented of people. I don't know. I think that they were trying to do a nice thing. Maybe they did lose it. We don't know the answer to that. That's the thing. This whole case is just full of so many ups and downs and ups and downs. There's more to come, to be honest with you. It's just ridiculous. It's all over the place, which is why I wanted to cover it. It's also one of the reasons why I've waited to cover it for so long, because I knew I was going to need some experience to cover this one.
And my main thing is that doesn't necessarily point to any kind of foul play at all. Points to incompetence, probably, yes, but it doesn't point to any foul play. That's my problem with when you hire someone to do something, they're going to try to give you the result that you want. There's been numerous cases where families hired a third party medical examiner, came up with supposed evidence that something was wrong or something was done incorrectly. And then it turns out that that person was basically lying on their ass. So I'm really skeptical when it comes to third party medical examiners.
There's still more coming.
I'm just going on a rant about these third party medical examiners because we talk about them a lot. It seems
Obviously, it's because people want to hear what they believe. And I get that. But at the same time, there could be truth to what this one found.
there could be, and I'm not discounting that at all. I'm not saying that anytime a third party medical examiner finds something that it's false. I'm also not saying that county and city medical examiners don't hide stuff and don't cover stuff up because I'm sure they do. I'm just saying that you've got to definitely take a third party medical examiner's claims with more of a grain of salt than you do any other time. Actually, I'd say you take them about the same, but they have more reason to lie in this case.
It just depends on why and how.
I'm not going to say that this third party medical examiner was lying or did lie because I don't know. But they definitely have a reason to lie because they're being paid by the victim's family who want the answers that they want. Obviously, they don't like the official cause, that's why they're paying them.
Maybe.
That's all I'm going to say.
Regardless of the private medical examiner's findings, police refused to change Kendrick's cause of death from accidental to homicide. At this point, his parents were absolutely sure it was homicide. They even had students in mind. Apparently, Kendrick had gotten into an altercation with another student that he was on a team with the year before, and he had told them things had just gotten worse over time. When investigated, though, the student in question had quite the alibi. He was on the other side of the school on camera, but they had other students in mind as well, and they also had quite the alibi. They were away on a wrestling trip, not even on campus. And if it wasn't them, who was it, and what was their motivation?
I want to start off by saying I feel for this family. I can't imagine what they're going through. Grief also does a weird thing to people. You're going to keep looking for answers when there may not be answers. You're going to see signs that just aren't there. And I'm not necessarily saying that this case, because I definitely think there's a lot of weird stuff to it, but I don't think anything that I've seen so far necessarily point to murder or foul play. And I think there's a lot of circumstances that add up to a lot of incompetence, a lot of shady people, but all that's after the fact. I don't see anything that necessarily points to being involved in something that happened before or during.
No, I agree. And I even started to look at it like, okay, you guys are starting to point specific people out. These are kids. At one point, the minors in question, their parents were in a government field. And they were conspiring that because the kids' parents were in the government field, they were covering it up. Listen, it goes deep. There are some things I have not even mentioned on this because this case gets so crazy. I have not even gone into specifics because it goes deep and it goes nuts. I like going into the far side of things, but I can't with this one. We would be here for so long.
So, my first and foremost thing is saying that because the parents work in the government field.
I believe it was the FBI. I'm not 1000% sure. It wasn't 100% relevant. So I was just like, I'm leaving that one alone for now.
As far as I'm aware, this case wasn't an FBI case.
It actually was, or I know the GBI, the Georgia Bureau of
Yeah.
Investigation, got
Well,
involved.
well, that's different though.
But I think the FBI at some point had to get involved.
I wouldn't see any reason for the FBI.
It wasn't a federal case.
Yeah. So then there's no reason they could get involved.
I don't know why. Listen, this case made my head explode.
The GBI, I can understand,
Yeah, the GBI 1000% was involved.
but that's different than that.
Correct. That's the state bureau as compared to the fed.
And I know that they'll get involved in a lot because they have a lot more resources than city levels usually.
Yes. But at some point, this case went national just due to the media coverage and exactly how much the parents were putting out there.
Yeah, I get that, but FBI still has protocol, and there would be nothing that would warrant them getting involved because it's not a federal crime. At least from my understanding is that TV shows get accurate is the fact FBI and local police don't get along great. So for them to say that the FBI somehow swayed the investigation, which I get, the FBI is an easy target. Apparently, according depends on what part of the internet you go to, you can see that the FBI is involved in any kind of conspiracy that ever.
And
I get where they're coming from, but bringing minors who weren't even at the school into this, that goes a little too far for me.
don't get me wrong, I understand pointing out that, hey, there was an altercation with this student. He might have had something to do with something. Cool. Investigate that. That makes sense. But once you point out he was not even like in the school at the time, cool. That's it. It's done.
Having an altercation with someone does not mean that it's going to go to the level of murder.
No, it doesn't.
I've had so many altercations with other kids in my life when I was a kid,
I'm pretty sure I've had altercations with you. Like I've
yeah,
punched you a few times.
more than a few times.
Several.
She's abusive, guys.
I am.
Very abusive. But I've had many altercations with people, and it's never went to the level of murder.
And that's something that I was thinking about. Typically, from what I've seen from men anyway, women typically hold grudges times a million. Men typically fight it out for a second and they're good.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I was about to say. Two girls fight, they're going to be enemies for life. Two guys fight, an hour later, they could be best friends.
Exactly. Like, that's the behavior that I end up seeing. I
Yeah.
I don't typically see two guys fight and then still hate each other consistently for years and years and years. I might see them, like, head nod or something and just be like,
I
"That dude's a douche." But aside from that, like, that's it.
I will say the one exception to that rule is when a girl's involved. Like always, girls make things worse.
Yes, we do. Think
Now I don't know if he was dating someone or wanted to be dating someone or there was a girl involved. I don't know,
there's no record of anything along those lines, actually.
which to me is weird because that would point to more of a motive than anything. Because obviously we know that guys will kill for girls.
Maybe that's our motivation right there, and we just haven't found it.
Or we found it and they just think it's not important, which to me that'd be the most important question to ask.
True, especially when you're 17.
Oh yeah.
Your emotions are running so high.
Yeah. There's only 2 people that I hate from high school to this day, and both of the situations involved a girl.
Of course.
One of them everybody knows because that's where the fuck Chester came from.
Really? That makes a lot of sense.
But point is, there seems to be a lot of questions that weren't asked, and then a lot of conspiracy theories trying to be formed into this. And my problem is whenever you start like saying something's a conspiracy, you start losing a lot of credibility. And then you also distract away from the getting it solved. So I get that you feel that your son was murdered. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. I don't see any evidence, but as we made abundantly clear, I'm not a detective.
Me either. Listen, I was so bad with names that I'm still so bad with names, especially with all my memory stuff. It seems to be worse this week. So the only names that I included in this was literally just Kendrick and his parents because I am so horribly bad with names this week that it was like, nope, that's all I'm including. Sorry.
But I think all this other stuff is distracting away from what actually happened. And all the evidence so far is more for after the fact and a cover up after the fact. But like I said, the school doesn't surprise me. They're going to cover their own butts. Police department mostly, as we've seen with Welch, can be incompetent, not necessarily malicious in any way.
Just horribly incompetent.
Medical examiner, it's nothing that really points to any kind of incompetence or cover up on that end.
No, it was just two different findings. And that could be simple as a matter of opinion, or it could have just been once the body had, I don't want to get gross here, but sat for long enough, different findings could have come out.
Yeah. Every body that you examine, you could bury it and then a year later examine it again and you'll find more details that you weren't able to see at the time. Medical examiners are a lot of it is subjective, how you interpret the evidence, just like detectives in a way. So there's nothing that points to any kind of malicious to me, at least to me in this instance. The secondary medical examiner obviously is biased towards the family because that's who's paying them. That's my point.
We're still not done. During the whole trial, the Johnson family had been, the best way to put it is ruthless. They fully believed their son had been wronged. They sued the funeral home for not telling the truth about the condition of Kendrick's body. They filed a lawsuit against the school district for failing to investigate the incident properly that happened the year before Kendrick died. They even filed a lawsuit aimed specifically at the students they believed were responsible. They held vigils, found ways to still be in the media, and made sure Kendrick was not forgotten. They were forced to pay $300,000 in legal fees. But that did not stop them because they believed Kendrick did not die in an accident. On November 15th, 2018, they had another autopsy done at the family's request. This too came back as blunt force trauma. Now, this one came back with a confession, an anonymous confession, that Kendrick was hit in the neck with a 45-pound dumbbell. But police and the sheriff's office believe that it's a hoax. The family, to this day, is still trying to get the case reopened and get justice for Kendrick.
Oh, I've got some words on this one. Let's start with the lawsuits. That is fucked up. You are going to sue the funeral home that gave your son a free funeral.
Yep,
That is messed up in so many ways.
yep. because they did not tell them the truth about Kendrick's body condition.
And why would they?
In my opinion, this is my opinion, I wouldn't tell them. For instance, we buried my dad 5 years ago. If the funeral home came back and was like, oh, by the way, half of your dad's internal organs were gone, I'm sorry. That's not what I would want to know about my father.
Yeah.
That's not how I would want to know. I would want to believe my father was buried whole. Do I understand that this is a different circumstance? Yes. However, I don't believe they did it in any intentional way.
And here's the main point. The point that actually matters is it does not matter one way or
No.
another. It does not change anything. It does not do anything. All it does is make you look like friggin' dicks for
Yeah. I also don't think it went anywhere. I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure it didn't go anywhere.
no, but the fact that they even sued him in the first place is messed up in so many friggin'
Yeah.
ways.
I didn't think that was a good look personally.
No.
I did not.
And the more you talk, the more I'm not on the side of the family. I'm on the side of justice and wanting to find the answers. But the family has not done this in the right way. Because if you want to sway public opinion, get the public on your side, you have to get the public on your side. You
Yeah.
cannot. And
That lawsuit that was aimed at the students, there were like 38 students on that suit. 38. Like,
And that's what I was just about to get into. You do not sue students who you think may or may not have had something to do with it. That is a fishing expedition that is not going to do any points and not going to get you closer to any answers.
which is exactly why they were forced to pay $300,000 in legal fees. And then they attempted to get out of the $300,000 in legal fees. And they were like, no.
And they shouldn't because that would be, I would definitely classify that as a frivolous lawsuit.
Yeah. It's just so excessive.
Because here's the thing, once you get lawyers involved, any chance of getting the actual truth is gone because you're going to get the perception. Whoever can argue their version of the truth the best is going to be the winning party. That is all you're going to get. So immediately, once they got the lawyers involved and started doing these lawsuits, they instantly lost any hope of ever getting the truth because one of those students may have known something. Now they're never going to say it.
Yeah, absolutely not. No, thank you.
And this pisses me off the most just because the way they went about it totally destroyed any chance of them ever getting any kind of answer.
Now, there were some things at the very beginning that I thought that they did a little bit out there and crazy. Like when they decided to get attention and go with media coverage, and they put the photo around. Basically, if you haven't seen it, it's a left and right photo of Kendrick when he was alive and Kendrick when he was deceased. And it is a jarring difference between the two photos, which is exactly what they wanted. And that is exactly what got so much media coverage. I think that was brilliant.
Yeah. And I'm 100% on their side at the beginning.
And then they went a little bit too far, in my opinion.
No, they did not go a little bit too far. They went way too far. Because here's the thing, in situations like this, you have to get the public on your side.
Yeah, they were doing vigils and stuff, which is great. Vigils, phenomenal, fantastic. Keep doing that.
But
But my God, like,
and here's the thing, a lot of the people who are, on the sidelines of this is instantly what they're going to be thinking. Oh my God, this family's suing everybody who even so much as looks at this case. Now I got to get as far away as possible or I'm going to get sued.
honestly, like when I was covering this, I'm like, should I stop?
Yeah, who knows? Maybe we'll get sued.
I don't have the money for that. I'm really poor.
But here's the thing. I do not understand this at all. Like, I get that you want answers. I would do a lot of the stuff that they've done in this case. If it was me, I would not be suing everybody involved just because. Because, like I said, once you get lawyers involved, you're never going to get the truth at that point.
No, everything's going to be skewed one way or the other.
Yeah.
Every single thing.
Because the version of truth that becomes reality is the one that who argues it best. Now, let's get into this supposed anonymous confession. 100% bullshit. 100.
Oh, it's ridiculous. It came out of nowhere. Now, do I think that something similar could have happened? Sure. But it's just, it came out of nowhere.
And this is exactly why they went about this the wrong way because now my thinking is they're the ones who actually, submitted that anonymous.
Even if it did come from a mostly reliable source, like where did it come from? And the source, if it is reliable, they're not going to come forward now.
No, 100%. But either way, that is someone who either is just a piece of crap and is making up false confession, or it's the family just trying to keep the story alive.
Maybe I'm just really wimpy, but I'm having a hard time imagining hitting somebody with a 45-pound dumbbell.
And here's the thing, if it was a 45-pound dumbbell, I would assume that there'd be a lot more damage to the head.
You'd think. I get my dogs like a 50-pound bag of dog food, and I have to hoist that over my shoulder. I have to lift with the knees and like really hoist it.
But now 45 weight, that's going to be all that weight in a central point.
Exactly. It's not just like over and centralized. It's one little tiny point hitting you.
And then that's going to lead not only blunt force trauma, but I'm almost guaranteed from everything I've learned doing this podcast is it would probably lead to a skull fracture in some way.
You would think. And I wouldn't think that you would hit somebody weirdly on the neck, shoulder area. I don't know. It's just weird.
But so anyways, that confession is a hoax, not a hoax. And I don't blame the police department in this instance for not believing it because
I don't either. I'm with you. I honestly didn't think it was real. Do I think that maybe a dumbbell, probably not 45 pounds, could have potentially been a weapon? Maybe. There was a gym, maybe, but I don't think, I don't know. There's just too many weird variables.
so I just this whole thing is I definitely think the family went the wrong route on this. They started out on the right path and then they just went far off. Now, I will say, go back to my very first opinion that nothing that we've talked about today points, at least to me, in any kind of foul play as far as murder. Do I think something else happened besides what they're claiming? Probably. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's any kind of someone murdered him because there's a lot of situations that could have happened that could have been accidental. Someone panicked. We see stuff like that all the time where people just panic and make stupid choices, especially if a teenager's involved.
Oh,
You know,
100%. And frankly, teenagers themselves don't make smart choices.
no. I'm looking at this like three separate events: the actual death, what happened immediately after the death, and then the investigation afterwards. The investigation afterwards was definitely flawed in many ways. Definitely could have been done a lot better, especially for all parties involved. They could have handled things a lot better. Immediately after it happened, the part that I'm thinking a lot could have been changed. The actual death, I don't think anything really points to that being murder. It should be changed from accidental to murder. The only thing to me that is possibly could change is what happened immediately after the death.
I have theories.
All right, let's get into them because I'm getting frustrated.
There are really only a few possible things that could have happened in this case, in my opinion. We're just going to go over all three. Theory number one, it really was just a crazy, tragic accident. Kendrick put his shoes in the mat, was able to get one out, and got stuck getting the other. Somehow he just got stuck in the process and died. Theory number two, Kendrick was murdered and was thrown into the mat to cover it up. This is the more common theory, but what really is the motive? Theory number three, I'm calling it accidental manslaughter. What if it's a combination of the two? What if somebody really did hit Kendrick with something like a dumbbell, but they separated, thought they were fine, and Kendrick went to go get his shoes and passed away after getting stuck inside the mat, not realizing exactly how much damage had been done?
Jordan wouldn't let me talk between each theory, so we'll just cover each theory very quickly.
You've been long-winded today.
I got a lot to say on this. So obviously the first one accidental, right?
Yes. Accidental, then murdered, then
Combination of it. So for me, first theory, I would say it's unprobable.
the only thing that stops me entirely from the first one, obviously, is the blunt force trauma.
But again, I don't necessarily believe the blunt force trauma.
The third autopsy was not somebody they hired, I don't believe.
But it was done at their request. And by that point, the well was already poisoned.
It was, but it was just the third one.
I know, but
I'm just saying that's two in a row.
yeah. But like I said, the first one kind of poisoned the well by saying that it was blunt force trauma. Second one would be influence because there's no way they didn't know anything about this case.
Probably, but there were a lot of years between it. The first one was 2013, the next one was 2018. That's a 5-year difference.
It's also a long time to poison the well for, though.
It is, but there was also a lot of talk at the time about the first one, which was positional asphyxiation, which is a really strange way to die.
Not necessarily. It's happened many times.
It's happened. For
Look at
instance, the cave accident, that was one, but
there.
it's not common.
No, but it's not uncommon either. There's a case not too long ago, actually. There's kid was in a minivan in a school parking lot, and the seat reaching back, and the seat fell on top of him. Basically, ended up dying the same exact way. That one was, which I would like to cover that one too, because that one was messed up in so many ways. But I think, like I said, I'm looking at this in three different segments. So I think the accidental death is very possible. And I also think that there could have been other person involved for manslaughter charges type thing, where they led to the death, but necessarily didn't murder him.
Yeah, that's what I was calling it. Granted, that's just my terminology for it. Was just my terms, obviously, but that was where I was leaning towards it, where it was somehow an accident that led to his death, but wasn't just an accident either.
Like I said, I don't think anything points to it being murder.
I think it's somewhere between the two.
That's what my opinion is too. And it's just, it seems the problem with throwing stuff at the wall to try to see what sticks is then you start losing out on the picture. The picture starts getting muddy. And that's what happened here is, and I'm not blaming them in any way, sort, because grief does a lot of weird things to people.
It does. Please, nobody take this the wrong way. I believe that they believed that racism had a strong factor in this. And I have no idea if racism in Valdosta is a big thing. I don't live there. Okay. We live in Missouri. Is racism a thing here? Sure. I have no idea if it is there. I'm sure it is. Racism is a thing everywhere. But I think they believed that it was. And maybe they were pushing for it harder. I have no idea. I don't live in their shoes.
Here's the thing, just getting into an altercation and that lead into murder is so far apart.
And while I fully understand that if Kendrick had a problem with another student, I fully understand that you probably should check it out for a second. But that doesn't mean that they should necessarily be a suspect or anything.
No, they should definitely be interviewed. There's nothing showing that's not what happened. It's not saying that the police didn't interview them because obviously they're minors. Their interviews and the fact that they're even suspects wouldn't even be public knowledge unless it got to the stage where they were charged. And even then, in some states, you can't even release the name of the minor who was charged because there's such strict laws protecting minors, which it should be. I don't know Georgia's laws or anything like that, but I'm pretty sure even if they were interviewed, that wouldn't necessarily be public knowledge. That's not something that they would release. For all we know, all the students were interviewed and there's just nothing that they found. And like I said, there's nothing that points to the other end of the spectrum.
No, there's just not, like, period. That's what gets me about this case. It almost could be purely accidental, except there's just these little tiny bits of evidence that just don't quite fit right either. But it's just so close. It just doesn't quite add up 100%.
Could the police totally bungle this and messed up? Yes. We talk about it all the time. Police do that a lot. But there's just nothing here that necessarily points to it being a murder. Suspicious, yes. Definitely other circumstances involved, yes. But nothing necessarily that points out murder. Now, there's nothing else that excludes it, but it's just a tragic situation. And I really wish they would get answers because everybody deserves to have answers.
I agree. Everybody does.
But I also know that it doesn't seem like they're willing to accept any answer besides what they've already concluded themselves. For all we know, we already have the answer. We just,
Won't let it go.
yeah.
Agreed.
And unfortunately, aside from the police coming out and saying that, yes, he was murdered, I don't think they're going to ever be happy with an answer that they get.
Probably not. Because even then, it's not like we've got somebody to pin it on.
On blunt force trauma, like I said, it could have been something totally unrelated to his death.
100%. He was in sports. He was a wrestler for sure. I think he might have been in something else.
For all I know, they could have been picking up on an old accident or something. I don't know. But it's a tragic situation, and he's definitely the real victim in all of this because of the circumstances, and it's tragic.
Very much. A parent's love for their child knows no bounds, but how far would you be willing to go for justice? We may never know what truly happened to Kendrick, but we do know his parents will never give up the fight for justice. joining us on this journey through all things mysterious. Your engagement is what makes this so rewarding. If you've enjoyed uncovering these mysteries with us, please show your support by liking, subscribing, and following us on your favorite listening platform. For more intriguing content and ways to stay connected, don't forget to check us out on our links in the description below. Your involvement is the key to unlocking more thrilling mysteries.
As always, we keep you guessing.